Have you ever been judged for your parenting by someone who has no idea what they're talking about? That's exactly what happened to me. My own sister, Vanessa, called me a terrible mother while laughing in my face. Little did she know that her words would set off a chain of events that would change both our lives forever. I'm Rachel Thompson, and this is the story of how I enrolled my sister's kids in my school for free, and the unexpected lessons we all learned along the way. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Growing up in suburban Cincinnati, Vanessa and I were never particularly close. 4 years my junior, she always seemed to live in a different world than I did. While I was the serious, studious type who volunteered at the library and planned my future meticulously, Vanessa was the life of every party, floating through school on charm and last-minute cramming sessions. Our parents never quite knew what to do with two daughters so fundamentally different, so they mostly let us be, hoping we'd find common ground eventually. We didn't. After high school, I pursued my lifelong dream of becoming an educator. 4 years of college, a master's degree in early childhood education, and countless hours of student teaching later, I found myself as the founder and principal of Little Acorns Academy, a small but well-respected private elementary school focusing on progressive education methods. Meanwhile, Vanessa bounced between various jobs: bartending, real estate assistant, social media manager for local businesses, never quite finding her footing. By 35, I had built Little Acorns into something special. Our waiting list grew each year, and parents frequently told me how our approach had transformed their children's relationship with learning. I had also become a mother myself to twins, Eliza and Mason, now 7 years old. My husband, David, a pediatrician at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, supported my career wholeheartedly, and together we'd created a home filled with books, art, and what I believed was a healthy balance of structure and freedom. Vanessa, at 31, had married Blake Harrison, a successful insurance executive whose family connections had landed him a cushy position right out of college. They had 3 children in quick succession: Jackson, 8, Emma, 6, and Tyler, 4. From the filtered lens of Instagram, their family life looked picture-perfect: designer clothes, tropical vacations, and a sprawling home in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. Our adult relationship had settled into a pattern of obligatory holiday gatherings and occasional family birthdays. Civil, but distant. I didn't particularly mind this arrangement. We had our separate lives, and forcing closeness seemed pointless after so many years. That all changed last Thanksgiving. Mom and Dad had insisted on hosting the entire family at their house, despite their recent downsizing to a condo that wasn't designed for large gatherings. David was on call and couldn't make it, so I arrived with Eliza and Mason, bearing homemade cranberry sauce and a vegetable casserole. Vanessa's family was already there, her children running wild through the condo while she sipped wine in the kitchen with Mom. "Rachel!" Mom exclaimed when I walked in. "Thank goodness you're here. Can you help with the turkey? I think I've overcooked it." I set down my dishes and went to work salvaging dinner, while Eliza and Mason quietly found a corner to read the books they'd brought along. From the kitchen, I could hear Jackson and Emma fighting over the TV remote, their voices growing increasingly shrill, while Tyler was climbing on furniture despite Dad's gentle attempts to redirect him. "Vanessa," I called, "could you maybe check on the kids? They're getting pretty rowdy." My sister waved dismissively. "They're fine. It's a holiday. Let them have some fun." Mom shot me a pleading look that said, "Don't start anything," so I bit my tongue and focused on the turkey. By the time we all sat down to eat, I was already exhausted. The twins had remained well-behaved, helping set the table without being asked. In contrast, Vanessa's children had to be practically dragged to their seats, complaining about the seating arrangement, the food options, and basically everything else. "Jackson, please put your phone away during dinner," I suggested when I noticed my nephew texting under the table. "He's just playing a game." Vanessa said with an edge to her voice. It keeps him quiet. I just thought it might be nice to have everyone present for family dinner, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Dad jumped in, desperately changing the subject to the Bengals' chances this season, and conversation limped along until dessert as Mom served pumpkin pie. Tyler knocked over his water glass, sending it shattering to the floor. While I immediately got up to help clean, Vanessa remained seated, scrolling through her phone. Accidents happen, I said, mopping up the water while Dad swept up glass shards. Tyler, to his credit, looked genuinely sorry. It's okay, buddy, I told him. Maybe we can be more careful with glass cups, though, okay? Don't parent my kid, Rachel, Vanessa snapped, finally looking up from her phone. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I wasn't, I began. Yes, you were. You always do this. Judge me. Judge my kids. Like you're Mother of the Year or something. I took a deep breath. I wasn't judging anyone. I was helping clean up a spill and making sure Tyler doesn't feel bad about an accident. Oh, please, Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. Your perfect little robots over there barely say a word, while you look down your nose at my kids for actually acting like normal children. Eliza and Mason looked up, hurt evident in their expressions. They weren't robots. They were well-behaved kids who'd been taught to respect others' homes and use indoor voices. That's enough, Dad interjected. But Vanessa was just getting started. You. Know what's funny, Rachel? For someone who runs a school, you're actually a terrible mother. She laughed. Actually laughed as she said it. The table fell silent. Mom looked like she might cry. Dad stared at his pie. Even Vanessa's kids seemed uncomfortable. Vanessa, Mom finally managed. What? It's true. Her kids are like little programmed drones. They don't know how to have fun or be normal. They're going to need so much therapy later. I stood up, my hands shaking. Eliza, Mason, please get your coats. We're leaving. Oh, running away as usual. Vanessa smirked. I'm not having this conversation in front of the children. Any of the children, I said firmly. Mom, Dad, thank you for dinner. I'm sorry to leave early. As we drove home, I struggled to maintain my composure while Eliza and Mason sat quietly in the back seat. Mom? Mason's small voice broke through my thoughts. Are we robots? My heart shattered. No, sweetie. Not at all. You're kind, thoughtful, children who understand there's a time and place for different behaviors. That's actually a very grown-up thing to know. Then why did Aunt Vanessa say that? Eliza asked. I sighed, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes adults say hurtful things they don't really mean. Aunt Vanessa and I, we see things differently, especially when it comes to raising children. I like being able to read and do puzzles, Mason said after a moment. Jackson is always on his phone and he doesn't even know what books I like. Everyone is different, I reminded them. That's what makes the world interesting. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, I recounted the disaster to David over the phone. He was sympathetic but also pragmatic. You know how Vanessa is, he said. She's always been jealous of you. Jealous? Of what? She's the one with the perfect Instagram life and the rich husband. But you've built something real, Rachel. Something meaningful. Little acorns is your vision come to life, and you're making a difference. Plus, our kids are pretty amazing even if they're not running wild through restaurants like some people's. I smiled despite myself. I just don't understand why she'd say something so cruel. A terrible mother? Really? You know it's not true. I know it's not true. The kids know it's not true. Don't let her get under your skin. But Vanessa's words had already taken root, and over the next few weeks I found myself second-guessing my parenting choices. Were Eliza and Mason too structured? Did they have enough free play? Were they happy? I watched them more closely, looking for signs of the robotic behavior Vanessa had cruelly described. Instead, I saw two children who were confident, creative, and genuinely kind, who built elaborate fantasy worlds with their toys, laughed until they couldn't breathe at silly jokes, and showed empathy beyond their years. No, the problem wasn't with my parenting. The problem was Vanessa's complete misunderstanding of what good parenting looked like. 2 weeks before Christmas, I received an unexpected call from Blake, Vanessa's husband. "Rachel, I need a huge favor," he said, sounding stressed. "I wouldn't ask, but we're desperate." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. "What's going on?" I asked cautiously. "It's Jackson's school. He's being asked to leave after winter break." This was surprising news. "What happened?" Blake sighed heavily. "A pattern of disruptive behavior, falling grades, some incidents with other students. The headmaster says they've given him multiple chances, but they can't continue accommodating him when he's disrupting the learning environment for others." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "That must be really hard for all of you." "Yeah. Well, here's the thing. We can't find another private school that will take him mid-year. The waiting lists are ridiculous, and the public school in our district, it's not what we want for him." I could sense where this was heading. "Blake, Little Acorns has a waiting list too. I can't just—" "Please, Rachel. I wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate. Jackson needs structure, not the chaos he's been allowed to create. I think your school might be exactly what he needs." I was stunned by his admission. "Have you discussed this with Vanessa?" A long pause. "Not yet. I wanted to see if it was even a possibility first. Even if I could make room for Jackson, and that's a big if. What about after what happened at Thanksgiving?" Vanessa made her feelings about my parenting pretty clear. Blake groaned. "I heard about that. She was out of line, way out of line. She'd had too much wine, and honestly, Rachel, I think she's jealous." There was that word again. "Of what?" "Of how easy you make it look. Vanessa struggles with the kids, especially Jackson. He's so bright, but he's challenging." Emma follows. His lead, and Tyler's still little, but already copying his siblings. "Vanessa would never admit it, but she's overwhelmed. Seeing your kids so well adjusted makes her feel like a failure." I let his words sink in. "That doesn't excuse what she said." "No, it doesn't, and I've told her as much. But right now, we need help. Jackson needs help." I thought about my nephew. Behind the attitude and the constant screen time was a smart kid who'd never been given proper boundaries. Was it his fault that his parents had different priorities? "Let me think about it," I finally said. "But Blake, and it's a big if, I can find a spot for Jackson, Vanessa would need to be on board. I won't be the aunt who went behind her back to enroll her son in my school." "I understand. Let me talk to her, see where her head is at." After hanging up, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking. Little Acorns did have a strict waiting list policy, but as principal, I had discretion for emergency situations. Was this an emergency? Or was I setting myself up for more family drama? I thought about Jackson, how bright-eyed and curious he'd been as a toddler before phones and unlimited screen time became his primary occupation. I thought about how he'd once loved building elaborate Lego structures and asking endless questions about how things worked. Something had gone wrong along the way, and while it wasn't my responsibility to fix it, I couldn't help wondering if Little Acorns might be exactly what he needed. 3 days later, my phone rang again. It was Vanessa. "Blake tells me you're considering taking Jackson at your precious little school," she said without preamble. I took a deep breath. "I said I would think about it. We do have a waiting list and—" "Save it, Rachel. We both know you can make it. Happen if you want to." Her tone made me want to hang up immediately, but I reminded myself this was about Jackson, not our sibling rivalry. "You're right, I probably could, but I need to know that you're on board with this. Little Acorns has a particular philosophy and approach. Parents need to be partners in the process." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "Jackson's been asked to leave Winston Prep," she finally admitted, her voice smaller. Did Blake tell you that? Yes. It's humiliating. All my friends' kids go there. Now I have to explain why Jackson isn't returning after break. Of course, her first concern was social embarrassment, not Jackson's welfare. This isn't about you, Vanessa. It's about what Jackson needs right now. Easy for you to say. You're perfect, right? Perfect school, perfect kids. I bit back a sharp retort. Nobody's perfect. But I do believe every child deserves an educational environment where they can thrive. If you believe Little Acorns could be that for Jackson, I'm willing to make it work. But you and Blake would need to support our methods at home. Consistency is key. Another pause. What exactly would that mean? Limited screen time, regular reading, consistent bedtimes, following through on consequences, being present. So basically, I'd need to parent like you, she said, a hint of her earlier bitterness returning. You'd need to parent like a parent whose child attends Little Acorns, I corrected. This isn't about me versus you, it's about Jackson. The line went quiet again, and for a moment I thought she might have hung up. Fine, she finally said. If you can get him in, we'll try it your way. But I'm not making any promises about turning into June Cleaver overnight. I'm not asking you to, I'm just asking for your cooperation. After we hung up, I immediately called a meeting with my administrative team. Finding a spot for Jackson would mean adjustments, but it felt like the right thing to do. Not just for family peace, but for Jackson himself. 1 week later, I called Blake with the news. We can take Jackson when school resumes in January. I've assigned him to Mrs. Bennett's class. She's excellent with students who need a bit more structure and positive reinforcement. Wow, Rachel. Thank you. What about tuition? I should warn you, we're a bit overextended right now with the new house renovations. I hesitated. Little Acorns wasn't cheap, and scholarships were limited and carefully allocated. Let's call it a family scholarship, I decided. For now, we can reassess for next school year. A free ride? Are you serious? Consider it my investment in Jackson's future. But Blake, I meant what I said to Vanessa. You both need to be on board with our approach. Absolutely, whatever it takes. I want my son back, the curious, engaged kid he used to be before all the attitude and screens took over. As I hung up, I wondered if I'd made the right decision. Was I setting myself up for disaster by bringing family dynamics into my professional life? Was I being fair to the families on our waiting list? And most importantly, was this actually what was best for Jackson? Only time would tell, but something told me that enrolling my nephew at Little Acorns was about to change everything. For him, for Vanessa, and especially for me. By March, both Jackson and Emma had settled into a routine. At Little Acorns, the transformation wasn't instant or magical. There were still challenging days, but the progress was undeniable. Jackson's reading scores had improved dramatically, and Emma had blossomed in Mr. Diaz's arts-integrated curriculum, revealing a talent for storytelling that had previously gone unnoticed. More surprising than the children's progress, however, was the gradual thawing between Vanessa and me. Our occasional coffee meetings to discuss the kids had evolved into weekly lunch dates, where our conversations sometimes ventured beyond school matters into tentative personal territory. David thinks I'm having a midlife crisis, I confided one Tuesday over salads at a cafe near Little Acorns. Apparently reconnecting with my estranged sister qualifies. Vanessa laughed. A genuine laugh, not the sharp defensive sound I'd grown accustomed to over the years. Blake's just relieved. He always hated playing mediator at family gatherings. We put them through a lot, didn't we? She nodded, pushing a cucumber around her plate. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Why we ended up so at odds. Waited, sensing she had more to say. I always felt like I was living in your shadow, she continued quietly. Perfect Rachel with her perfect grades and perfect plan. When we were kids, Mom and Dad were always asking why I couldn't be more like you. This revelation stunned me. Really? Because from my perspective, they adored you. You were the fun one, the pretty one, the one who could charm her way out of anything. Vanessa looked genuinely surprised. Is that how you saw it? Of course. You made everything look effortless. I was just the nerdy overachiever who worked twice as hard for half the recognition. We stared at each other across the table, decades of misunderstanding suspended between us. We really didn't know each other at all, did we? Vanessa finally said. Maybe it's not too late to start. Our newfound connection was tested the following week when Tyler came down with strep throat, leaving Vanessa in a childcare bind for Jackson. And Emma. I can't believe the nanny picked this week for a cruise, she lamented over the phone. Blake's in Chicago for that conference, and I've got 3 showings I can't reschedule. I can take them, I offered without hesitation. They can come to my house after school. The twins would love to have their cousins over. There was a pause on the line. Are you sure? Jackson and Emma together can be a lot, even on good days. They'll be fine. Besides, this is what family does, right? That afternoon, I brought all 4 children home. To my surprise, Jackson immediately asked if he could show Mason his bridge building technique from science class. Emma and Eliza disappeared into Eliza's room to work on a secret project they refused to divulge. When Vanessa arrived to pick them up at 7, she found all 4 children seated around our dining table, engrossed in a heated Monopoly battle. You're bankrupt, Mom, Emma announced cheerfully. Aunt Rachel landed on my boardwalk with a hotel. Aunt Rachel, Vanessa mouthed silently to me, eyebrows raised. Until now, the children had carefully maintained the formal Ms. Thompson at her insistence. I shrugged, equally surprised by the shift. Later, after the kids had gone upstairs to pack up Emma's things, Vanessa surveyed my living room with its mismatched but comfortable furniture, walls lined with bookshelves, and baskets of art supplies. It's different than I pictured, she admitted. What did you picture? I don't know. Something more sterile? Like a classroom? I laughed. Because I'm such a robot? She had the grace to look embarrassed. I was awful that day. I don't even know why I said those things. Don't you? I asked gently. Vanessa sank onto the couch. Fine, I was jealous and scared. Jackson's school had been sending notes home for months, but I kept ignoring them, thinking they just didn't understand him. Then at Thanksgiving, watching your kids, how respectful they were, how they helped without being asked. It was like a mirror showing everything I'd gotten wrong. You haven't gotten everything wrong, Vanessa. No? Because from where I'm standing, my kids were heading down a concerning path until you stepped in. I sat beside her. Parenting isn't a competition. Different children need different approaches, says the professional educator who actually knows what she's doing, Vanessa replied, but there was no bite to her words, just weary self-deprecation. Nobody knows exactly what they're doing, I assured her. We're all just making our best guesses and hoping we don't mess up too badly. Some guesses are better than others. I couldn't argue with that. The good news is kids are resilient. It's never too late to change course. The conversation might have continued, but Jackson and Emma thundered down the stairs, effectively ending our heart-to-heart. Yet something had shifted, a deeper understanding that continued to grow over the following weeks. In April, Little Acorns held its annual spring showcase, where each class presented projects they'd been working on. Jackson's class had created a functioning model city with sustainable energy sources, while Emma's had written and illustrated original folktales. I spotted Vanessa, Blake, and Tyler in the crowded auditorium, surprised when they waved me over rather than maintaining the polite distance that had characterized our previous school interactions. This place is amazing, Blake said warmly. I had no idea how comprehensive your curriculum is. Jackson hasn't stopped talking about his solar panel design, Vanessa added. He's already asking for materials to build a larger version at home. The pride in her voice was unmistakable, and I felt a corresponding swell of emotion. Both of them have worked incredibly hard. Their teachers are very impressed. Tyler tugged at my sleeve. When do I get to come to this school, Aunt Rachel? The question hung in the air between Vanessa and me. Well, I began cautiously, you'll be old enough for pre-K in the fall, but that's something for your parents to decide. We've actually been discussing it, Blake said, glancing at Vanessa for confirmation. If you'd be willing to consider another family scholarship, at least initially. I was touched by the request, not because it validated my educational approach, but because it represented a level of trust I never expected to earn from my sister. I think we could arrange that, I replied, watching Vanessa's tense shoulders relax slightly. Later that evening, as I was gathering my things to leave, Vanessa appeared in my office doorway. Got a minute? She asked. I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. She sat, fidgeting with her purse strap. I've been meaning to ask you something about the tuition. My stomach tightened. Was she going to insist on paying after all? The school's budget couldn't easily absorb 3 full scholarships, but I'd make it work somehow rather than risk our fragile new relationship. What about it? I asked carefully. I was wondering if you'd accept payment in a different form. This wasn't what I'd expected. What did you have in mind? Real estate services, she said in a rush. I know you've been looking to expand Little Acorns. Blake mentioned you've outgrown this building. It was true. We'd been quietly exploring options for a larger campus, though we hadn't made any public announcements. I've got a property that might be perfect, Vanessa continued. The old Wilson estate on Maple. They're motivated sellers, and I have connections that could get you an excellent deal. Plus, I'd waive my commission. I was momentarily speechless. This wasn't just a business proposition. It was an olive branch, a way for Vanessa to contribute without directly acknowledging that she couldn't afford the tuition. That's incredibly generous, I managed. It's the least I can do, she replied. After everything you've done for us. For the kids. I'll need to discuss it with the board, but thank you, Vanessa. Truly. She nodded, standing to leave, but paused at the door. You know, when I called you a terrible mother at Thanksgiving, it was really myself I was talking about. I think I've always known I was falling short. You're not a terrible mother, I said firmly. You're a mother who loves her children and wants the best for them, just like me. For a moment, I thought she might cry, but she squared her shoulders instead. Maybe we're not so different after all. As I watched her walk away, I marveled at how far we'd come since that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner. From bitter rivals to tentative allies to something approaching friends, all because I'd made the impulsive decision to enroll her kids in my school for free. Sometimes the most valuable lessons happen outside the classroom, and in this unexpected journey of reconciliation, both Vanessa and I were becoming students again, learning patience, forgiveness, and the complicated art of being family. As spring turned to summer, the Wilson estate property that Vanessa had suggested became more than just a possibility. It transformed into a reality. The Little Acorns board unanimously approved the acquisition after our initial walkthrough revealed sprawling grounds perfect for outdoor learning spaces, a historic main building with character to spare, and several outbuildings that could be converted into specialized classrooms. What followed was a whirlwind of activity, securing financing, navigating zoning permits, and planning renovations that would honor the property's heritage while creating a state-of-the-art learning environment. Through it all, Vanessa proved invaluable, leveraging her connections in ways I never could have managed on my own. The Historical Society is being difficult about the modifications to the East Wing, I lamented one evening in June as we spread blueprints across my dining room table. The twins and David were playing basketball in the driveway, their laughter drifting through open windows. Vanessa studied the plans, twirling a strand of hair, a habit from childhood I'd forgotten until our recent reconnection. Leave the Historical Society to me, The president's wife is a client. I helped them find that Victorian they've been renovating for 3 years. Is that ethical? I asked, only half joking. She grinned. It's networking, Rachel. Something you educator types could stand to learn more about. I had to admit, Vanessa's particular talents were proving as valuable in their way as my educational expertise. Our skills complemented each other in ways neither of us could have predicted. By mid-July, with renovation plans finalized and construction, crews scheduled to begin work in August, we allowed ourselves a moment to celebrate. David suggested a family barbecue at our house, all of us together, for the first time without the pressure of a holiday or school function. Are you sure that's wise? I asked him privately. Things are better with Vanessa, but a whole afternoon together. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. I think it's time. The kids get along great now. Blake's always been easy to talk to. And you and Vanessa haven't had a major argument in what, 3 months? That might be a record. Very funny. I nudged him playfully. But you're right. Let's do it. The day of the barbecue arrived with perfect weather, sunshine, a gentle breeze, and temperatures mild enough for outdoor dining. David manned the grill while I arranged platters of fresh vegetables, fruit, and homemade potato salad on our patio table. When Vanessa's family arrived, I was struck by subtle changes in their dynamics. Tyler ran to hug Eliza and Mason without prompting. Emma carried a carefully wrapped package that she announced was a homemade dessert she'd baked herself. And Jackson, most surprisingly, was empty-handed, no phone or gaming device in sight. We're enforcing screen-free weekends now, Blake explained when he noticed my double take. Jackson complained for the first few weeks, but honestly, it's been transformative for all of us. Vanessa set down a bottle of wine. He's reading again, like actual books. Remember how he used to devour those dinosaur encyclopedias as a little kid? Now it's all about renewable energy and environmental science. Mrs. Bennett will be thrilled, I said. She mentioned he has real potential in those areas. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself observing the casual interactions between our two families with a sense of wonder. The children moved seamlessly between activities. Badminton in the yard, a complex trading card game on the porch, helping David assemble dessert. The stilted formality that had characterized our previous gatherings was notably absent. After dinner, while the kids were occupied with ice cream sundaes, Vanessa pulled me aside. Blake and I have been talking, she began, uncharacteristically hesitant. About next year. My heart sank a little. Despite the improvements in our relationship, I'd been bracing myself for the possibility that they might withdraw the children from Little Acorns once the initial crisis had passed. Perhaps they'd found another private school more aligned with their lifestyle. Or maybe the commute to our current location was proving too burdensome. We want to discuss tuition, she continued. For all 3 kids. I nodded, preparing for the negotiation I'd been expecting. Of course. As I mentioned before, we can work out an arrangement. We want to pay, Vanessa interrupted. The full amount. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. The full tuition? For all 3 children? She nodded, a determined set to her jaw. It's important to us. To me. I know what you did, offering those spots when we were desperate, and I'll never forget it. But things are different now. We've made some changes. What kind of changes? I asked, curious. Vanessa took a deep breath. I've scaled back my real estate work to part-time, downsized some aspects of our lifestyle. And Blake got that promotion he's been working toward. That's wonderful, I said sincerely. But Vanessa, 3 full tuitions is substantial. I don't want you to stretch yourselves too thin. We won't be. Blake's new position came with a significant raise, and honestly, our priorities have shifted. Private school tuition feels a lot more important than renovating the master bathroom or taking that Mediterranean cruise we'd been planning. I was touched by the gesture, recognizing it for what it was, not just financial support for the school, but a statement about the value they now placed on the education their children were receiving. "If you're sure." "We're sure," she affirmed. "Besides, with the new campus expansion, you'll need every bit of operating capital you can get." She was right about that. The Wilson estate purchase had stretched our financial resources to the limit, even with the favorable terms Vanessa had negotiated. "There's something else," she added, glancing back at the patio where our families were gathered. "We'd like to establish a scholarship fund for families who need it." Of all the surprises Vanessa had delivered in recent months, this one left me truly speechless. "A scholarship fund?" I finally managed. She nodded. "We're thinking of calling it the Second Chance Scholarship. For children who need a different educational environment, but whose families can't afford it." "Like Jackson," I said softly. "Exactly like Jackson, who might have continued spiraling if you hadn't stepped in." She met my eyes directly. "Every kid deserves that chance, Rachel. Not just the ones whose aunts run the school." I blinked back. Unexpected tears. "That's incredibly generous." "Well," she shrugged, attempting to lighten the moment, "we may need some help structuring it properly. Tax advantages and all that. I figured the board would know the best approach." "Of course," I assured her. "We can absolutely help with that." As we rejoined the others, I watched Vanessa settle into a chair beside David, laughing at something he'd said. The easy camaraderie between them was new. Another small miracle in a season full of them. Later, as dusk descended and we lit torches around the patio, all 7 children engaged in an elaborate game of hide-and-seek throughout the yard. Their shrieks of delight provided a soundtrack to our adult conversation, which flowed with surprising ease from school matters to neighborhood news to shared childhood memories that, for once, brought laughter rather than tension. "Remember when Dad tried to build that treehouse?" Vanessa reminisced, her expression softening. "And he accidentally nailed his shirt to the platform?" I laughed. "Mom was furious about the tear. She made him sleep in that shirt for a week to learn his lesson about wastefulness." "They'd be happy to see this," Blake observed quietly, gesturing to our blended family gathering. "Your parents always hoped you two would find your way back to each other." A comfortable silence fell over the group as we contemplated this truth. My parents had indeed tried countless times over the years to bridge the gap between Vanessa and me, always without success. The irony wasn't lost on me that it had taken a cruel comment at Thanksgiving and a desperate educational need to accomplish what their well-meaning interventions never could. "They're coming for the 4th of July, I mentioned. "Mom called yesterday to confirm." Vanessa's eyes widened slightly. "You didn't tell me that." "I'm telling you now," I replied. "I thought maybe we could do something like this again. When they're here, they won't know what hit them," she said with a small smile. "Dad might have a heart attack if we make it through a whole meal without sniping at each other." "We'll have to warn him in advance," Blake joked. "Medical preparation and all that?" As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave, Jackson approached me with uncharacteristic shyness. "Aunt Rachel," he began, fidgeting slightly, "I have something to ask you." "What is it, Jackson?" Mrs. Bennett said that sometimes older students can help with the younger grades, like reading buddies or science helpers. I nodded. "That's right. It's part of our community leadership program." Could I maybe do that next year? With the kindergartners, for their science time? The request touched me deeply. 6 months ago, Jackson could barely focus on his own schoolwork, let alone consider helping others. "I think that could definitely be arranged," I told him. "You'd be wonderful with the younger students." His face lit up. "Cool, I already have ideas for simple experiments they could try. Like the volcano one, but with actual learning about chemical reactions, not just the explosion part." As they drove away, David slipped his arm around my waist. "Quite a transformation, huh?" "Which one?" I asked. Jackson? Vanessa? Our relationship? The school? All of it, he said thoughtfully. When you made that decision to enroll Jackson, did you have any idea where it would lead? I shook my head. I just knew I couldn't turn him away. Despite everything, he's family. The new campus opened in January of the following year, a full term ahead of schedule thanks to Vanessa's relentless oversight of the construction crews. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew local press, current and prospective families, and community leaders curious about the innovative approach to education that had earned Little Acorns its growing reputation. Standing at the podium to deliver my remarks, I surveyed the crowd. In the front row sat my family, David and the twins, beaming with pride, Blake with Tyler on his shoulders for a better view, Emma recording the entire event on Blake's phone for a documentary she was creating, and Jackson attentively taking notes for the article he planned to write for the school newsletter. And beside them, Vanessa, my once estranged sister, now the school's unofficial property manager, fundraising consultant, and most enthusiastic ambassador. Little Acorns began with a simple vision, I told the assembled guests. To create a learning environment where every child is seen, valued, and challenged to grow. Today, as we expand into this beautiful new campus, that vision grows with us. I paused, making eye contact with Vanessa. But the most important lesson I've learned on this journey isn't one I taught in a classroom. It's that growth often happens in unexpected ways, through unexpected challenges, and sometimes through the very relationships we find most difficult. A knowing smile passed between us. The name Little Acorns has always represented potential, the mighty oaks that can grow from the smallest beginnings. Today, I'm reminded that this applies not just to our students, but to all of us. To families finding new ways to support each other. To siblings rediscovering connection. To communities coming together to nurture the next generation. As applause rippled through the crowd, Vanessa mouthed 2 words to me across the distance. Thank you. I smiled and mouthed back, no, thank you. For all her faults, and despite our complicated history, my sister had given me an unexpected gift. Her careless words at Thanksgiving, "You're a terrible mother," had set in motion a chain of events that healed not just Jackson's educational struggles, but our fractured family bond. Sometimes the most profound teaching happens outside the classroom, and sometimes the most important lessons come from the people we least expect to learn from. As I cut the ribbon to officially open our new campus, I silently dedicated it, not just to our students, but to second chances, for children like Jackson and Emma, and for sisters who had almost forgotten how to be family. The first full academic year at our new campus flew by in a whirlwind of achievements and milestones. Enrollment increased by 30%, allowing us to hire 3 additional teachers and expand our specialized programming in STEM and arts integration. The Wilson Estates' generous grounds had been transformed into outdoor learning spaces, complete with a student-maintained vegetable garden, an amphitheater for performances, and a nature trail that wound through a small wooded area perfect for science observations. But the most rewarding developments were the ones that couldn't be quantified in enrollment numbers or fundraising totals, the subtle shifts in school culture, in family engagement, and in my own approach to leadership. One Tuesday morning in late April, I was reviewing budget projections for the upcoming school year when Mrs. Bennett knocked on my office door. "Got a minute?" she asked, her expression suggesting this wasn't a routine check-in. "Of course." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Is everything okay?" She settled in, arranging her ever-present clipboard on her lap. "More than okay, actually. I wanted to talk to you about Jackson." My nephew was now completing his 2nd year at Little Acorns, having transitioned successfully to 5th grade after catching up academically during his first year with us. While no longer the struggling student who'd arrived mid-year with attitude and resistance, Jackson still required occasional redirection, a normal part of pre-adolescent development. "Is there a problem?" I asked, mentally preparing for whatever behavioral issue might have arisen. Mrs. Bennet smiled. Quite the opposite. I wanted you to see this. She handed me a stapled packet of papers, a science project proposal, judging by the header. The topic was renewable energy implementation in urban school settings, with a detailed analysis of how Little Acorns could potentially become energy independent through solar and wind installations. Jackson wrote this? I asked, flipping through. Pages of carefully researched data, cost-benefit analyses, and surprisingly sophisticated technical diagrams. Every word, Mrs. Bennet confirmed. He's been working on it for weeks during his independent study time. But here's the really remarkable part. He's proposing it as a fifth-grade legacy project. He wants to present it to the board as a multi-year implementation plan that future classes would continue after he moves on to middle school. I felt a lump form in my throat as I read Jackson's conclusion. Little Acorns taught me that even small beginnings can lead to big changes. This energy independence project would be my way of giving back to the school that helped me grow. This is incredible, I managed. It's beyond fifth-grade level work, Mrs. Bennet agreed. I've never seen this kind of forward thinking from an elementary student. The best part is that he's already recruited a team of classmates to help with different aspects of the presentation, including Emma and Eliza, I noted, spotting their names in the acknowledgments section. Mrs. Bennet nodded. Your niece has quite a gift for graphic design. She's creating the visual materials for their presentation. And Eliza's handling the financial projections. She's got her father's head for numbers, it seems. Pride swelled within me, not just in Jackson's remarkable turnaround, but in the collaborative spirit that had developed between cousins who, less than 2 years ago, had barely known each other. When are they hoping to present this? I asked. They've requested a slot at the May board meeting. Jackson's quite insistent that they need approval before summer break so they can begin preliminary work before he starts middle school. I smiled at my nephew's newfound determination. Tell them their request is granted. I'll make sure the board members know to expect something special. After Mrs. Bennet left, I sat for a long moment with Jackson's proposal in my hands, marveling at the transformation. From a disengaged, device-addicted child struggling in school, to a passionate young environmental advocate planning for future generations, the journey seemed almost miraculous. Unable to keep this development to myself, I texted Vanessa. Got a minute to talk about Jackson? Good news only, I promise. Her response came quickly. In a showing until 3. Drop by the house after? Blake's making his famous lasagna. Bring David and the twins if you want. This casual invitation to dinner, extended without special occasion or holiday obligation, still felt novel after so many years of strained formality between us. I quickly accepted, promising to bring dessert. That evening, after the children had demolished Blake's lasagna and retreated to the basement game room, now blessedly free of screens but well-stocked with board games and art supplies, I showed Jackson's proposal to Vanessa and Blake. He wrote all this? Blake asked, clearly stunned as he examined the detailed schematics. Every word, I confirmed, echoing Mrs. Bennet. His teacher thinks it's exceptional, well beyond grade level. I had no idea he was working on something this extensive, Vanessa said, her voice tinged with wonder. He mentioned a school project, but we thought it was just a regular assignment. That's because you've given him the space to develop independence, I pointed out. Remember how he couldn't do anything without constant supervision and redirection? When he first came to Little Acorns? Blake shook his head as if still amazed by the contrast. The other day, I found him researching colleges with strong environmental engineering programs. Colleges? He's 11. He's found his passion, I said simply. That's what education should do. Not just fill kids with information, but help them discover what lights them up. Vanessa was quiet, still reading through Jackson's conclusion. When she looked up, her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. You know what I realized recently? If you hadn't taken Jackson when you did, If we'd just found another traditional private school that would accept him, he might never have discovered this side of himself. The acknowledgement hung in the air between us, weighty with implication. For Vanessa to admit, even indirectly, that her previous educational choices might have limited her son's potential was a significant concession. Different approaches work for different children, I said carefully. Little acorns happened to be the right fit for Jackson at the right time. Don't be modest, Blake interjected. Your school, your approach, turned our son's life around, changed our family's trajectory, if we're being honest. Vanessa nodded in agreement. Which reminds me, I've been meaning to talk to you about Tyler. His pre-K teacher thinks he might benefit from some specialized attention for his reading readiness skills before kindergarten. We've just expanded our summer program, I offered. Ms. Delgado is running a reading readiness workshop specifically for incoming kindergartners. I could add Tyler to the roster. That would be perfect, Vanessa said gratefully. And there's something else we wanted to discuss with you both. She glanced at Blake, who nodded encouragingly. The Second Chance Scholarship has been more successful than we anticipated, she continued. The fundraising event last month exceeded our target by almost 40%. I nodded. The gala, organized largely through Vanessa's social connections, had indeed been a triumph, transforming what had started as a modest scholarship for 1 or 2 students into a substantial fund that could support several families. We've been thinking, Blake picked up the thread, about expanding the concept, creating a foundation that could support similar scholarships at other progressive schools across the region. Not everyone has a sister who runs the school, after all. The notion caught me by surprise. That's ambitious. We have the connections, Vanessa pointed out, and now, the credibility of success with the initial scholarship program. Plus, Jackson's journey gives us a powerful story to share with potential donors. With your permission, of course, Blake added quickly. We would never use Jackson as a poster child without your blessing as his principal, and obviously, we'd make sure he's comfortable with his story being shared. I considered the proposal thoughtfully. I think Jackson would be proud to know his experience might help other children find their own educational path. As his principal, I have no objection, though you should definitely involve him in the conversation. And as his aunt? Vanessa asked softly. I smiled. As his aunt, I couldn't be prouder of how he's risen to every challenge. If sharing his journey helps other children find the right educational fit, I think that honors his growth. The conversation drifted to practicalities, legal structures for the foundation, potential partner schools, fundraising strategies, but beneath the planning lay a deeper current of shared purpose that would have been unimaginable 2 years earlier. Later, as David and I drove home with the twins dozing in the back seat, he reached over to squeeze my hand. You're smiling, he observed. Am I? You've been smiling all evening. It's nice to see. I hadn't realized my contentment was so visible. It just feels right, doesn't it? All of this. Like we've found a new balance. Who would have thought? Vanessa calling you a terrible mother would end up being the best thing for your relationship? I laughed softly. Life takes some strange turns. The May board meeting arrived, and with it, Jackson's big presentation. He stood before the board members with remarkable poise, walking them through his renewable energy proposal with the confidence of someone twice his age. Emma's visual aids were indeed impressive. Clean, professional-looking slides that complemented Jackson's data-driven approach. And Eliza's financial projections demonstrated a nuanced understanding of budgeting that made David beam with paternal pride. What struck me most, however, was watching Vanessa and Blake in the audience. They sat beside David, all 3 parents, leaning forward with identical expressions of focused attention, nodding and taking notes as the children presented. No phones, no distractions, just full, present engagement with their children's achievements. When the board unanimously approved Phase 1 of Jackson's proposal, a modest solar installation to power the administrative building, the room erupted in applause. Jackson's face flushed with pride as board members approached to shake his hand and commend his initiative. "Remarkable young man," the board chair murmured to me. "Hard to believe this is the same child you told us about 2 years ago." "Children rise to meet the expectations we set," I replied. "Sometimes they just need the right environment to flourish." Later, as the families gathered in my office for an impromptu celebration with cupcakes Emma had insisted on baking for the occasion, I found myself observing the scene with a sense of completion. The children chattered excitedly about next steps for the solar project, while the adults discussed logistics and potential community partnerships to support the initiative. "Penny for your thoughts?" Vanessa asked, sidling up beside me. "Just taking it all in," I admitted. 2 years ago, if someone had told me we'd be standing here like this, "You'd have had them committed," she finished with a laugh. "Me too." We watched as Jackson explained some technical aspect of solar panels to Tyler, who gazed up at his older brother with undisguised admiration. "You know what's funny?" Vanessa said after a moment. "That comment I made? The terrible mother thing, I don't even remember exactly what set me off. Too much wine, probably. Old resentments are bubbling up." "It doesn't matter now," I assured her. "No, but I've been thinking about it lately. About how sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes if you're willing to push through the discomfort." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Educational theory calls that productive struggle. The idea that meaningful growth often requires working through challenging situations rather than avoiding them. "Is there anything you don't have a professional term for?" she teased, bumping my shoulder lightly with hers. "Probably not," I conceded with a smile. "Hazard of the profession." As the celebration wound down and families prepared to leave, Jackson approached me with a question that caught me off guard. "Aunt Rachel, do you think I could come back and check on the solar project next year? Even though I'll be in middle school?" "Of course," I assured him. "This is your project. You should absolutely stay involved as it develops." He nodded seriously. "Good, because I've been thinking about Phase 2 already. There's this new technology for rainwater collection that could integrate with the solar system to maximize efficiency." "Is that so?" I asked, struggling to keep a straight face at his earnestness. "Yeah, I could show you the research this weekend. Maybe you and Uncle David could come over. Mom's making her chicken thing that everyone likes." Another casual family invitation, offered without hesitation or awkwardness. My heart swelled. "We'd love that," I told him. As we locked up the school building that evening, David slipped his arm around my waist. "Full circle moment back there," he observed. "How so?" 2 years ago, you made the decision to enroll Jackson despite all the complications. Now he's leaving elementary school but finding reasons to stay connected to little acorns. And to you. He was right, I realized. What had begun as an emergency intervention had evolved into something far more meaningful. Not just an educational solution, but a bridge between generations that would extend beyond Jackson's time as a student. The following Sunday, our families gathered at Vanessa and Blake's home, where the conversation flowed easily between Jackson's solar project updates, Emma's middle school applications — she was determined to follow her brother to an environmentally focused charter program — and Tyler's growing excitement about officially joining Little Acorns as a kindergartner in the fall. As the children disappeared into the backyard to demonstrate some concept involving hoses and plastic cups that apparently related to Jackson's rainwater collection research, Vanessa handed me a glass of wine and settled beside me on their patio sofa. "I need to tell you something," she said, her expression suddenly serious. My stomach tightened reflexively, an old habit from decades of complicated interactions. "What is it?" I asked cautiously. She took a deep breath. "I'm considering a career change. This was unexpected." "Oh? Leaving real estate?" "Not entirely. but scaling back significantly to focus on a new venture. She hesitated. I've been talking with some educational consultants about creating a parent coaching program for families transitioning between school environments. I stared at her in disbelief. You want to work in education? Not as a teacher, she clarified quickly. More as a guide for families navigating the same challenges we faced with Jackson. Someone who can help parents align their home environment with their children's educational needs. The irony wasn't lost on me. My sister, who had once laughed while calling me a terrible mother, now wanted to advise other parents on supporting their children's education. What brought this on? I asked. She gazed out at the yard, where all 5 children were now engaged in what appeared to be a highly technical water balloon experiment. I keep thinking about how lost I was before, how many mistakes I made because I didn't understand what Jackson needed. There are other parents out there feeling that same helplessness, Rachel. Maybe our family's journey could help them find their way sooner. Her words resonated with the educator in me, the part that had always believed in the power of shared knowledge and community support. I think it's a wonderful idea, I said sincerely. And for what it's worth, I think you'd be excellent at it. Surprise flickered across her face. Really? You're not just saying that? When have I ever just said anything to spare your feelings? I asked with a laugh. She conceded the point with a rueful smile. Fair enough. So you think it's not completely crazy? Not crazy at all. In fact, I added, warming to the idea, Little Acorns could be your first official partner. We're always looking for better ways to support families through transitions. As our conversation expanded into potential collaboration, I marveled at the symmetry of our journey, how Vanessa's professional life was now being influenced by the educational principles she had once dismissed, just as my school had benefited from her business acumen and connections. From a terrible mother to an educational consultant, from estranged sisters to professional collaborators, from a cruel comment at Thanksgiving dinner to a thriving family bond. Sometimes the most important lessons emerge from our most difficult moments, and sometimes the people who challenge us most profoundly are the ones who ultimately help us grow. As I watched our children, cousins now inseparable, working together in the yard, I silently thanked Vanessa for that painful moment that had set everything in motion. By laughing and calling me a terrible mother, she had inadvertently created the opportunity for both of us to become better educators, better parents, and finally, better sisters. 3 years later, on a crisp autumn morning, I stood at the entrance of Little Acorns, greeting students as they arrived for the first day of school. The campus hummed with energy, children reconnecting after summer break, parents snapping first-day photos, teachers putting final touches on classrooms. Ms. Thompson, a familiar voice called out. I turned to see Jackson, now 14 and nearly as tall as me, striding confidently across the courtyard. No longer my student, he still visited regularly as the self-appointed project manager for the school's sustainability initiatives, which had expanded far beyond his original solar proposal. Shouldn't you be at your own first day of high school? I asked, giving my nephew a quick hug. He shrugged. Freshman orientation isn't until 9. Plenty of time to check on the new irrigation system installation. His eyes gleamed with the same passion that had emerged during his final year at Little Acorns. The contractor promised it would be ready for the fall planting, but I wanted to verify myself. Always the perfectionist, I teased. The irrigation can wait. Your education comes first. Actually, a new voice interjected, he's here on official business. Vanessa approached, elegant as always, but with a relaxed confidence that had replaced her former brittle perfectionism. She carried a portfolio emblazoned with the logo of Second Chance Educational Consultants, the company she'd founded 2 years earlier. We're meeting with 3 potential partner schools this afternoon, she explained. Jackson's coming as our student ambassador. He insisted on checking the irrigation first, though. The way she rolled her eyes, affectionate rather than critical, reflected how thoroughly her relationship with her son had transformed. 3 new schools? I was impressed. What had begun as a modest scholarship program at Little Acorns had evolved into a thriving consultancy that helped progressive schools implement similar initiatives throughout the region. Jackson's story had indeed proven powerful, inspiring donors and educators alike. Denver is interested now, Vanessa said with undisguised pride. They want to pilot the program in 5 schools next year. That's fantastic. Interstate expansion. Already? She nodded. Turns out those networking skills transfer quite well to the education sector. Mom's crushing it, Jackson confirmed, checking his watch. But I really should look at that irrigation before we go. 10 minutes, Vanessa agreed. Then we're getting breakfast before orientation. As Jackson jogged toward the garden, Vanessa surveyed the bustling campus with evident satisfaction. Hard to believe how much has changed since that first day I dropped him off here, isn't it? In some ways, I agreed. But in others, it feels like exactly where we were always heading. We just didn't know it yet. Our philosophical moment was interrupted by the arrival of Emma, now 12 and entering 7th grade at her progressive middle school, shepherding Tyler toward his 3rd grade classroom at Little Acorns. He forgot his project folder, she explained, handing Tyler his Minecraft-themed folder. Good thing I double-checked. Thanks, Em, Tyler said, slightly embarrassed but grateful. The bond between the siblings had strengthened considerably over the years, with Emma naturally stepping into a mentoring role that Jackson had once modeled for her. Eliza and Mason are already inside, I told Tyler. They were hoping to show you the robotics lab expansion before the bell. His face lit up. The new 3D printers are here? Installed last week, I confirmed. But remember, I know, he recited good-naturedly. No unsupervised printing. Safety protocols at all times. As Tyler dashed off to find his cousins, Emma turned to her mother. Did you tell Aunt Rachel about the article? Vanessa smiled. I was getting to that. What article? I asked. Education Weekly is doing a feature on family-centered educational transitions, Vanessa explained. They want to profile Second Chance and Little Acorns as a case study in innovative approaches. They're interviewing everyone, Emma added excitedly, even us kids. They said our perspective is invaluable to understanding the holistic impact of educational philosophy on family dynamics. I laughed at her perfect recitation. Sounds like you've been practicing that quote. She grinned. Maybe a little. Jackson's been coaching me. He says media training is essential for effective advocacy. The systematic approach was pure Jackson, thorough, forward-thinking, and slightly beyond his years. Some things hadn't changed despite all the growth. When's the interview? I asked. Next month, Vanessa replied. They're sending a photographer, too. We thought maybe here at the school, to capture where it all began. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I think that would be perfect. The morning bell chimed, sending students scurrying toward their classrooms. Emma hurried off to catch her bus, while Jackson emerged from the garden, giving us a thumbs up that presumably indicated the irrigation system met his exacting standards. As they prepared to leave, Vanessa hesitated. Are we still on for Sunday? Mom's been texting me hourly to confirm attendance. I smiled at the mention of our mother's newfound enthusiasm for family gatherings, a natural response to the miraculous reconciliation of her daughters after decades of tension. Wouldn't miss it, I assured her. David's making his famous apple pie. And you're bringing? She prompted with a knowing look. I sighed dramatically. Store-bought dinner rolls as instructed. No homemade substitutions, I promise. Good. Because nobody needs a repeat of the sourdough incident. We both laughed at the memory of my disastrous attempt at artisanal bread making during last year's Thanksgiving, a meal that had once been a battlefield but had transformed into a genuinely joyful family tradition. After they departed, I made my way to my office, navigating the familiar hallways adorned with student artwork and project displays. The sustainability corner featured prominently in the main corridor, showcasing the ongoing initiatives that Jackson had set in motion: the solar installation, rainwater collection system, and now the new irrigation project. I paused before a framed photograph that hung beside my office door, a candid shot from the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the solar panels. Jackson stood at the center, scissors in hand, flanked by Emma and Tyler on one side, Eliza and Mason on the other. Behind them, Vanessa, Blake, David, and I stood together, our expressions mirroring the children's excitement. Beneath the photo, a simple plaque read, "From little acorns, mighty oaks grow." The phrase had taken on new meaning over the years, representing not just the school's philosophy of nurturing potential in each child, but the unexpected growth that had occurred in our own family. Inside my office, I found an email from Blake confirming the latest donation to Little Acorns Scholarship Fund, i.e., generous sum earmarked specifically for families requiring mid-year transitions. His commitment to the cause remained steadfast, driven by first-hand understanding of how the right educational environment could change a child's trajectory. Later that day, during a brief lull between meetings, I received a text from Vanessa. Jackson crushed freshman orientation, already signed up for the environmental club and engineering team. This kid. I smiled at the evident pride in her message. There had been a time when Vanessa's texts about Jackson contained only frustration and concern. Now they overflowed with pride and genuine delight in his accomplishments. Like mother, like son, I texted back. Heard Denver is interested in the program. You're crushing it too. Her response came quickly. Couldn't have done it without you. Partner. The word partner encapsulated our evolved relationship, no longer just sisters with a complicated past, but professional collaborators, co-parents in an extended family, unit, and finally, friends who had learned to value each other's complementary strengths. My phone buzzed again with another text, this one from my mother. Just confirming Sunday dinner. Your sister says you're bringing rolls. Store-bought, Rachel. We all remember the sourdough disaster. I laughed out loud. Some things never changed, including our mother's penchant for unnecessary reminders. But other things had changed profoundly, transformed by that pivotal moment when Vanessa called me a terrible mother while laughing at our parents' Thanksgiving table. That thoughtless comment, born of insecurity and resentment, had set in motion a chain of events that reshaped our family. By enrolling her kids in my school for free, I'd extended an olive branch that neither of us recognized at the time. What began as an emergency intervention for Jackson had blossomed into a thriving educational partnership, a reconciled family, and a model program helping other families find their own second chances. As I watched students traverse the courtyard outside my window, I reflected on how often the most meaningful growth emerges from painful moments. How conflict, when approached with openness rather than defensiveness, can lead to connection that might otherwise never have been possible. Sometimes the people who challenge us most profoundly are the ones who ultimately help us grow. And sometimes a sister who once laughed while calling you a terrible mother becomes your greatest ally in creating educational opportunities for children beyond your own. From little acorns, mighty oaks indeed. 5 years later, I stood in the crowded auditorium of Westridge High School, scanning the rows of graduating seniors for a familiar face. David squeezed my hand as the principal began calling names, knowing exactly who I was looking for. Jackson Blake Harrison. My heart swelled with pride as my nephew crossed the stage, tall and poised in his royal blue cap and gown. The golden cords of academic honors draped around his shoulders caught the light as he accepted his diploma. From our seats, I could just make out the sustainability pin on his graduation stole, recognition for the environmental leadership program he'd helped establish at Westridge. Beside me, Eliza and Mason, now 17 and preparing for their own graduation next year, cheered loudly for their cousin. On David's other side, my parents beamed with unmistakable pride, my father discreetly wiping away a tear. And in the row ahead of us, Vanessa and Blake sat with Emma and Tyler, all of them on their feet applauding. When Jackson looked toward our section and gave a subtle thumbs up, Vanessa's composure briefly cracked, and I saw her dab at her eyes. After the ceremony, we navigated through the crowd toward the designated meeting spot Jackson had texted us. We found him surrounded by friends and teachers, many of whom seemed reluctant to say goodbye to a student who had clearly made his mark on the school. "There's my favorite educator," he grinned when he spotted me, enveloping me in a hug that lifted me slightly off the ground. At 18, Jackson towered over me, though he still had the same bright eyes that had assessed Little Acorn's solar potential 7 years earlier. "Congratulations, Mr. Valedictorian," I said, straightening his slightly askew cap. "That speech was something else. You liked it?" he asked, a hint of the old uncertainty briefly visible beneath his confidence. "It was perfect," I assured him, "especially the part about educational environments as ecosystems." He smiled, pleased that I'd noted the callback to principles he'd first encountered at Little Acorns. His valedictorian speech had woven together themes of sustainability, community responsibility, and the transformative power of education, all delivered with a poise that belied his 18 years. "Stanford won't know what hit them," David added, clapping Jackson on the shoulder. My nephew had indeed achieved his dream of attending Stanford's environmental engineering program, having earned both academic scholarships and special recognition for his work implementing sustainable practices across 3 local school districts, an extension of the project that began with Little Acorn's solar panels. Vanessa appeared at my side, her eyes still glistening. "Can you believe this is the same kid who couldn't sit still for 10 minutes without a screen?" The wonder in her voice reflected the journey we'd all witnessed. A struggling 5th grader transformed into a focused, passionate young man with a clear vision for his future. "He was always this person," I said quietly. "He just needed the right conditions to grow into himself." She nodded, understanding the horticultural metaphor that had become something of a family philosophy over the years. "The photographer from Stanford Monthly wants some family photos," Blake announced, coming over with Tyler and Emma in tow. "Plus, I think your mom might explode if we don't take at least 50 pictures in the next hour." We gathered near a flowering magnolia tree, arranging ourselves in various combinations as my father played photographer. Nuclear families, grandparents with grandchildren, cousins together, the whole extended group, each configuration representing different facets of the bonds that had strengthened over the years. "Just the sisters," my mother directed at one point, shooing everyone else aside. Vanessa and I stood together beneath the magnolia, both in our Sunday best, her arm casually draped around my shoulders in a way that would have been unimaginable 8 years earlier. "Say second chances," my father called, earning laughter from everyone familiar with the family joke that had emerged from Vanessa's consulting company name. Later, at the celebration dinner we'd arranged at Jackson's favorite restaurant, the conversation flowed easily between reminiscences and future plans. Emma, who would be starting her senior year in the fall, was already fielding interest from several colleges impressed by the youth advocacy program she'd developed. "Columbia's offering a substantial scholarship," she mentioned casually, though the pride in her voice was unmistakable. "Their communications program looks amazing, and I could minor in education policy." "New York," Vanessa sighed. "So far." "Says the woman who's on a plane to Denver every other week," Blake teased, referring to Vanessa's expanding consulting work. "That's different," she protested. "Those are short trips. College is 4 years. 5 if she does the master's program," Emma corrected with a mischievous grin. "Which I'm definitely considering." Watching Vanessa process this information, proud of her daughter's opportunities while dreading the separation, I recognized the universal parental conflict between wanting children to soar and wishing they'd stay close to the nest. Tyler, at 15, was deep in conversation with Mason about the robotics competition their teams would face off in next month. Though attending different high schools, the cousins had maintained their close bond, finding common ground in their shared interest in technology and design. "We should collaborate instead of competing," Mason was suggesting. "Imagine what we could create if we pooled our resources." "Against the rules," Tyler reminded him. "But maybe next year for the independent showcase?" Eliza, meanwhile, was showing Jackson her latest architectural sketches, preliminary designs for an eco-friendly student center she hoped to submit to the state sustainable building competition. "The green roof needs more structural support," Jackson noted, pointing to a section of her drawing. "But the rainwater reclamation system is brilliant, very similar to what we implemented at Little Acorns, but more efficient." My daughter beamed at his approval. "That's because I improved on your original design, cousin." Evolution in action. Their good-natured technical debate continued as plates of food arrived, temporarily redirecting everyone's attention. "A toast," my father announced once everyone had been served, raising his glass. "To Jackson, not just for his remarkable achievements, but for being the catalyst that brought this family together in ways we never imagined possible." "To Jackson," we all echoed, glasses raised. My nephew looked simultaneously pleased and embarrassed by the attention. "I think Aunt Rachel deserves most of the credit," he deflected. "If she hadn't taken a chance on me when I was getting kicked out of Winston Prep. And if your mother hadn't called me a terrible mother while laughing at Thanksgiving," I added, with a wink at Vanessa. What had once been a painful memory had transformed over the years into something of a family legend. The inciting incident that set everything in motion. Time and perspective had alchemized hurt into humor, resentment into reconciliation. "Best insult I ever delivered," Vanessa acknowledged, raising her glass again. "To terrible mothers everywhere." "To second chances," Blake countered. "To Little Acorns," David added, completing our trio of interconnected family mottos. As dinner progressed into dessert, my mother leaned across the table. "I've been meaning to ask, Rachel, what will happen with the Harrison Sustainability Scholarship now that its namesake is graduating?" She was referring to the endowed scholarship that Blake and Vanessa had established at Little Acorns, which provided full tuition for a student demonstrating both financial need and interest in environmental studies. Originally created to honor Jackson's legacy at the school, it had become one of our most coveted awards. "It continues," Vanessa answered before I could speak. "In fact, we're expanding it. 2 recipients next year instead of 1. This was news to me." "You didn't mention an expansion." Vanessa smiled. "Consider it my graduation gift to Jackson, and my thank you gift to you. 8 years later, I'm still paying forward what you did for us." The conversation shifted to the upcoming summer plans. Jackson's internship with a sustainable architecture firm, Emma's leadership camp, various family vacation arrangements. But my mind lingered on Vanessa's words. After all this time, she still saw her generous community contributions as repayment for what she considered my act of grace in enrolling her children. Later, as the party began to disperse, Jackson pulled me aside. "I need your educational expertise." "For something," he said, his expression unusually serious. "Of course," I replied, curious. "What's up?" "I'm developing a proposal for Stanford, a community outreach program that would bring university students into underfunded schools to establish environmental science clubs." He hesitated. "It's inspired by what you did with Little Acorns curriculum. I want to get it right." "Send me the draft," I offered. "I'd be happy to review it." He nodded gratefully. "There's something else. Part of my scholarship requirements includes mentoring hours. I was thinking, maybe I could work with some of the Little Acorn summer programs, especially the Second Chance kids." The Second Chance he referred to were the scholarship students who had entered Little Acorns through the program Vanessa and Blake had established. Children from diverse backgrounds who, like Jackson once had, needed an alternative educational approach. We'd be honored, I said sincerely. Full circle moment, isn't it? That's what I thought too, he agreed. Those kids, they remind me of myself, before little acorns, before the solar project, before he found his path. The unspoken timeline hung between us, both of us aware of how differently his story might have unfolded without that pivotal intervention. You know, I said carefully, I've never properly thanked you. His brow furrowed in confusion. Thanked? Me? For what? For being the bridge that reconnected our family. Your journey brought your mother and me back together in ways I never thought possible. His expression softened with understanding. I never thought about it that way. It's true, I insisted. What began as an educational intervention for you became a healing journey for all of us. He considered this for a long moment. Then I should be thanking you too, for taking a chance on a difficult kid who didn't seem worth the trouble. You were always worth it, Jackson. Always. The sincerity in his eyes told me he finally believed it, perhaps the most significant outcome of all the years of academic achievements and environmental innovations. As we rejoined the others, I found myself standing between Vanessa and my mother, watching the next generation, Jackson, Emma, Tyler, Eliza, and Mason, huddled in animated conversation about some shared plan or project. Look at them, my mother murmured. After all those years I spent trying to get you two to get along, who would have thought it would be the grandchildren who finally made it happen? Vanessa caught my eye over our mother's head, and I knew we were sharing the same thought. How the most meaningful connections often emerge from unexpected sources, and how the most serious conflicts sometimes lead to the most profound resolutions. Everything happens for a reason, I suppose, my mother continued philosophically. Even calling your sister a terrible mother at Thanksgiving? Vanessa asked with a raised eyebrow. My mother looked horrified for a moment until she realized Vanessa was joking. Well, I wouldn't recommend that particular approach to conflict resolution, she said primly. But in this case, I can't argue with the results. None of us could. From that painful moment had emerged not just Jackson's educational turnaround, but a healing of family wounds that had festered for decades. The solar panels that now powered Little Acorn's administrative building were a tangible symbol of the energy that had been redirected from conflict to collaboration, from resentment to reconciliation. As the evening wound down, we gathered for one final photo, 3 generations framed against the sunset, bound together by blood and choice and shared purpose. Hey, Mom, Jackson called to Vanessa as we arranged ourselves. Remember when you used to say Aunt Rachel's kids were like little robots? Vanessa groaned. Are you ever going to let me live that down? Nope, he grinned. Especially since I'm pretty sure Mason and Tyler are plotting world domination through that robotics competition. Sustainable world domination, Mason corrected solemnly. We have principles. The laughter that erupted felt like a perfect conclusion to the day, joyful, inclusive, gently acknowledging the past while embracing the present. Later, as David and I drove home with Eliza and Mason dozing in the back seat, much as they had after so many family gatherings over the years, he reached for my hand. Proud day, he said quietly. Very, I agreed. Not just of Jackson, of you and Vanessa too. What you've built together goes way beyond family reconciliation. He was right. The educational partnership we'd forged had impacted dozens of families. Beyond our own, children who'd found their paths through the Second Chance program, schools that had implemented more supportive transition protocols, parents who'd learned to align their home environments with their children's educational needs. All because of a cruel comment at Thanksgiving dinner and the unexpected response it had triggered. From terrible mothers to educational innovators, I mused. Not the journey either of us expected. Life rarely follows the curriculum we plan, David observed. The best lessons usually happen off script. As an educator, I couldn't argue with his insight. The most valuable learning often emerges from the messiest moments, a truth that had played out dramatically in our family's story. My sister had called me a terrible mother while laughing, and I had enrolled her kids in my school for free. That impulsive decision, born of both compassion and wounded pride, had altered the trajectory of multiple lives, healing old wounds and creating new possibilities none of us could have imagined. Sometimes the mightiest oaks really do grow from the smallest, most unexpected acorns, and sometimes the deepest connections emerge from the very conflicts that once threatened to keep us apart. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.